over the past, gosh, I think we started these over a year ago because at Cerius, we don't just talk about leadership. We don't just place leadership. We like to equip leadership with the tools to stay current. Through content, insights, executive expertise, we're continually helping companies really navigate through what's next. And if there's one thing we've seen across the board lately, it's this: the pace of change isn't slowing down, and neither is the pressure on HR leaders to keep up with it. In fact, HR has become one of the fastest evolving functions in business. Why? Because the workforce of the future is here now. It's more dynamic, it's more talent driven, it's more tightly linked to business strategy than ever before. CEOs are increasingly turning to HR, not just for hiring and policies and compliance, but for leadership and growth and transformation and culture. That's why we launched Serious HR Today series. It's our way of helping you stay sharp on the latest trends, challenges, really those solutions that are shaping the future of our companies and our talent. Last month, we had Ken Finneran give us a big picture look at how the workforce is shifting over the next 20 years and leveraging AI and people to drive it. Today, I'm excited. We have Christina Karchik. We'll really take it a step further. We're going to not just step into the future, we're going to step into what's going on now with the practical framework and tools that you can use to align your organization with both strategy and stakeholder expectations. As we know, there's more expectations than ever being put on everyone. Christina's LinkedIn is in the chat and the notes. I encourage you to connect with her further. For a copy of the presentation, please reach out to Christina. Make the connection, have a conversation. She's happy to directly share it with you. Christina really is one of those dynamic HR leaders. She spent the last 2 decades transforming human capital strategies across global organizations. Today, you'll get to experience her passion for architecting scalable frameworks that really support the rapid pace of business growth. Christina has spearheaded award winning cultures and is committed to getting HR aligned with business operations that are going to flex and scale with the pace of our new paradigm. And with that, Christina, it is all yours. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Let's jump right in because there's a ton to discuss here today. Really quickly, what I do want to quickly address is, high level, what we plan to go over in this session. We'll have the opportunity to explore how to align your company structure with its strategy for maximum impact. We'll walk through a practical framework for agility, for discussing the role of talent philosophy, strategy, and culture while tackling some common scenarios like scaling or entering new markets. As HR leaders and executives, we play a pivotal role in shaping organizations that can adapt and thrive. So let's jump right in here. What we want to do is, and you'll notice throughout this, I will speak to the slides, not from the slides. So basically, we're going to review the agenda here, which will take approximately about 45 minutes. We will start with the fundamental principle that structure follows strategy. Then introduce a framework for building agile operating models. We'll examine how your talent philosophy, strategy, and company culture are foundational blocks in guiding your decisions. We'll also uncover tangible examples like how to structure around a visionary leader. How do you build cross functional product teams? How do you foster a customer driven culture? And I'll also share with you different questions you should be asking yourself within your role and also suggest some additional references for you to read towards the end. But throughout, I'll highlight best practices from organizational research. So with all that said, there's an awful lot to cover, and we're going to jump right into it. So, as I mentioned earlier, structure follows strategy. We start with a core principle in organizational design. Apologies. Structure must be driven by strategy. Your org design should be a reflection of what you're trying to achieve strategically. For example, if your company's goal is rapid innovation in tech, then you're going to need a flatter, more flexible structure. If you're pursuing operational excellency and efficiency in a stable market, a more traditional structure might be your best option. Misaligning can absolutely spell trouble. Imagine a company that says, hey, we're innovative and it's a priority of ours, but keeps a very rigid bureaucratic hierarchy. I think we all know what that'll lead to. You've just created an environment in which teams will struggle to deliver results. Research backs this. Nearly all companies will tweak or overhaul their structure as their strategy shifts. Though unfortunately, efforts often fail to deliver the expected outcome and benefits. The takeaway, be intentional. Again, you're going to hear me repetitively say this. Start with strategy, then align everything else around it. Throughout this presentation, we'll make references to frameworks like McKinsey's 7S model that ensure all aspects of the organization, not just the org chart, but also processes, people skills, leadership styles, and core values are pulling in the same direction. Let's introduce a practical framework for agile operating models. Essentially, run how you run and organize the company day to day in a way that's flexible and effective. We'll break into four pillars. The first one is setting direction. Often, not always, but often executives and founders do not expect HR to impact this area. That is not because of malintent, but simply as HR executives, professionals, we historically have played tactical roles for so long, therefore, really impacting how we're seen. But the truth of the matter is, now it's time to reshape our image. We are business executives first. We understand the constructs of organizations, and most importantly, we know our talent best, meaning we understand the nuances that are associated with how to build talent around the strategy, and therefore giving us a really fair advantage to be there and be able to help articulate the strategy. If we can't understand the strategy, then unfortunately, we cannot do our job. Therefore, we do play an intricate part in setting up the foundation for strategy conversations and facilitating and guiding the discussions so that when we leave the discussion, we're leaving with tangible results. Think of this as a cycle or system. We'll explore each of these pillars on the next slide. In the past, within the startup world, the focus on setting direction was often forsaken with the ideology we had to build the plane as we flew it, throwing things out there and seeing if they would stick for applying other companies' best practices without full thought of how to apply it to our own organization. Simply put, we were operating in a world of unknown, doing our very best to not only survive, but to thrive. Now we have had the opportunity to learn and revamp how to apply and use big corp ideology to fit into our world in ways that it truly does unlock our potential to thrive. With that said, we've learned that applying frameworks to create a strong foundation are key to enabling an organization to overcome expected challenges and prevent, most importantly, organizations from literally becoming their own blocker. Without proper frameworks and strategy, this has led to so many strong businesses losing their steam, which, as you can imagine, leads to repercussions that can affect their momentum and eventually will affect their growth. The truth is, these are learnings and pains we had to go through in order to understand there is a better way that will not stifle innovation or agility. In relations to this slide, it means crafting a vision that people can rally behind, get excited, what McKinsey calls a North Star shared across the organization. Now it's time to ask yourself, do your employees truly know your top priorities and mission? A critical step in building the fundamental blocks. Once the vision and strategy are clear, now you connect it to your organizational design, which becomes very imperative in being able to unlock and enable the talent within your organization. This is a high level step where you decide, given our strategy, what's the best way to organize? If your strategy calls for rapid innovation, Perhaps small product focused teams make sense. If it calls for operational excellence in multiple markets, maybe a regional structure with strong processes and governance is better. The key here is to intentionally align your building blocks to your org, team, department, roles with your strategy needs. It is also very helpful to lay out a few principles upfront before you start. For example, if collaboration is critical, one principle might be design for cross-functional teamwork, which could lead to creating multidisciplinary squads rather than pure functional silos. And lastly, ensure your strategy is distilled into clear goals or themes that can be cascaded down. As humans, we don't remember a 50-page document, but we can remember 3 to 5 goals for the year. Therefore, clarity here sets the stage for the next step, which is alignment. Once direction is set, the next step is aligning organizations so that every part is working in concert. A powerful way to achieve alignment is by using OKRs, which is objectives and key results, or a similar goal system like SMART goals. Let's say your strategy is to expand into new market and double your customer base. An objective might be establish a strong presence in market X with 100,000 new customers by year end. In this scenario, what you would look at for key results and cascade them down to your team is, for example, marketing key result would be generate Y leads. Sales key result would be convert ZDs. And I'm just saying, X amount of deals. Product key results would be localize the app, etc. These are examples. This way, all teams know their piece of the strategy. As HR or business leaders, we should champion transparency in goals and share company OKR or strategic priorities so everyone from engineering to go to market knows the game plan. Alignment also hinges on role clarity. This sometimes is an easy thing that easily gets missed and is really, really critical for unlocking agility and innovation. So, have you ever seen two teams doing duplicate work? Or how about a task falling through the cracks because everyone thought someone else owned it? Those are symptoms of unclear roles. Agile orgs put a big emphasis on clearly defining responsibilities. One of the things you can use in this area is what is referred to as the RACI model, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, or simply well-written job charters or descriptions. Those are two different ways to tackle this. When roles are clear, people can move faster and collaborate better because they know what everyone is doing. Finally, foster a culture of empowerment with accountability, which is very critical. Alignment isn't micromanagement. We want teams to feel ownership of their own goals so they can be creative and proactive, but we also need to set up cadences to review the progress. So, this can basically be maybe a weekly sprint review or quarterly OKR check ins, but it's just critical that you make sure that you're reviewing how you're progressing. I advocate that as HR, we implement performance management that aligns to these goals. This is definitely a separate conversation, but it's critical to incorporate key results and evaluations and rewards in order to drive high performing organizations. The result is an organization where everyone is focused on the big picture and knows how their success is measured, has the ability to consistently be agile and innovative.
One of the things that I love there, and I'm seeing some comments in the chat, is we talk about performance management as this big beast that no one has ever enjoyed, whether it be the individuals giving or receiving them. In that framework, when you're starting with your goals, your OKRs, you've got the clearly defined job charters. That performance management almost goes away and it becomes self managed because we know what's expected, we know where we're at, And that's the whole point. I'm seeing some comments here going off about that. That's the whole point of performance management. So forget what we call it, forget that annual thing, just what's expected. What number do we need to hit? Throw that scoreboard up there. No one at a baseball game is ever saying, what's the score? How are we doing when there's a scoreboard up there? So thank you for that framework. And it really makes that almost obsolete.
Thank you, and I love how you elaborated there, 100%, and like I said, it could be its own presentation, to be honest with you, because there's so much to unpack there, but you said it best, so thank you. And we're gonna talk about the 3rd pillar, which is enabling collaboration. Basically, making sure the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Even the best strategy and alignment won't go far if the teams remain isolated in silos. In many startups and companies, departments can become echo chambers. Our goal here is to deliberately knit the organization together. One tactic is forming cross functional teams for key projects. Many of you are very familiar with these concepts of, for example, squads or tiger teams. These break the mold of marketing works on their own thing, engineering works on their own thing. Instead, let's say, let's all tackle this goal together. That's the way to pretty much think about it. It's also important to clarify where the interdependencies lie. Basically, shine a light on how work flows between the teams. An option is to literally draw a map of key processes and mark which teams are involved at which times and different stages. Everyone then understands how their work impacts others downstreams or what input they need upstream. Another point is looking at where the friction lies. Friction exists in every organization. So now we want to avoid a culture where every little disagreement that you have or roadblock gets escalated all the way up the chain. That is not going to unlock your ability to be agile. Instead, empower your people to work it out together. Take yourself out of the process. It can be as simple as defining an escalation policy that says, first, talk to your counterpart on the other team. If that fails, involve your manager. And only if those two fail, then bump it up to the executive level. This will not only speed up problem solving, it will also build, which is critical, trust and accountability amongst teams. They feel ownership to fix their own issues, not just toss them over the wall and hope that somebody catches it. A side note here is this is an important element to cover in any leadership development program, enabling and holding your leaders accountable. And jump right back into the slide. For example, in practice here, I recommend that HR I apologize, collaboration by organizing interdepartmental offsites or workshops. This could be absolutely paramount in building this type of culture and making sure that silos are not created. Also consider formal mechanisms like a strategic initiative brief. This is an idea where if a challenge does arise, in which, let's be honest, they will arise, that it doesn't neatly fit into one team's charter, you can create a mini process to handle it. For example, suppose customer feedback indicates a need for a new feature that requires marketing and engaging and to support and coordinate. Instead of hoping someone picks it up, you initiate a brief, outline the issue, assign small cross functional teams to devise a plan, get their proposal, review it, incorporate feedback, and then let them execute. It's like a pop-up project team. This kind of approach can make your organization much more agile and collaborative because you're not confined strictly by an org chart when tackling complex challenges. The last pillar of the operating model is managing execution. This is about turning plans into results and doing it in a way that the organization learns and improves consistently, which is really important. There are several elements here that we need to talk about. The first is, which is really critical, communication. During execution, you want to avoid situations where one side of the company doesn't know what the other side is doing. Regular updates, whether it's a weekly email from the CEO or a daily stand up in team, create transparency. In my experience, even a short weekly newsletter or video highlighting progress on key goals or acknowledging simply wins can keep momentum and alignment strong. For large organizations, I would consider monthly all hands where leadership shares updates and answers questions. This can be very valuable. The goal here is that no one's working in a vacuum. Everyone feels informed about where the company stands and any adjustments that are currently being made. Second, measurement to execute well. We need to know how we're doing, which is so critical. Here's where KPIs and OKRs come back into play. If one of our objectives is customer satisfaction, for example, here we might want to measure, I would say everyone needs to measure NPS. But another thing we might be looking at is repeat purchase rates and watch those like a hawk. If your goal is operational excellence, maybe we measure cycle time or error rates. HR can contribute by ensuring these metrics are visible, maybe through dashboards or during performance conversations. When teams see the needle move, or in some cases not move, they can respond accordingly. One McKinsey insight found agile teams often focus on a single metric for success in a given initiative. That kind of focus can be powerful in execution. A third perspective, a practice borrowed from Scrum and Agile methods, after a sprint or project, gather the teams and discuss what went well and what could have gone better. The key here is to do this in a blameless way. It's not about who messed up, it's about how we can all improve the process or support each other better next time. Make it safe to bring up issues. Over time, this builds a culture of continuous improvement. Fourth, is change and risk management. This is a really critical component that can oftentimes be forsaken and not discussed. No execution, we all know no execution goes 100% to plan. For example, maybe you need to implement a new software system. How do you manage that so the change not only is adapted, but you also ensure that people are not resisting it? Or perhaps a risk like a key supplier might fail to deliver. Do you have a contingency? This is where we partner in the change management, for example, by training staff or communicating changes clearly to reduce anxiety as well as for risk, some organizations keep a risk register for big projects, which simply is a list of what could go wrong with owners to watch out for each item. Ultimately, managing execution is about keeping the organization accountable and agile at the same time. We hold folks responsible for their goals, but we also watch external and internal feedback to decide if we need to tweak our approach. If the strategy tells us a strategy isn't hitting the mark, an agile org doesn't wait a year to course correct. It makes adjustments on the fly. This ability to execute, measure, learn, and change is what makes an organization truly agile.
Question here, Christina, on that, because we know agile and technology, it's usually 2 weeks. It's kind of tough to go through that when you're working on projects cross-functionally. Is there a usual time frame where you say get the project to fit within? Is it 30 days, 60, 90 days? How do you make sure that project's not going on for the next 9 months? Do you have a time frame you recommend?
It really depends on what you're trying to achieve. And you brought up something really critical that I didn't mention. So thank you so much for pointing it out, is being able to set a timeline. Without a timeline, exactly to your point, you really, yes, you have your OKRs to measure, but within what time frame, within what perimeter. So exactly to your point, depending on what you're trying to achieve, the timeline is critical so that not only are you looking at your metrics and you're saying whether or not you're meeting this, you're also assessing as you go along. For example, 30 days for this particular initiative. Okay, 2 weeks in. Are we in the yellow? Because if we're still in the red, are we going to be able to make that initiative in time? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It answers some of the questions that we're seeing pop up here. Thank you.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. Thank you. So now I'm going to get into an analogy that I absolutely adore because it has tremendous meaning here. So I love using the redwood forest as a metaphor for organizational design. Now, if you've ever had the privilege of standing amongst California redwoods, you know how inspiring they truly are. I mean, these are trees that have been around for thousands of years, some of the most tallest living things on earth. You think such massive trees must have really deep roots, but surprisingly, redwood roots only go 8 to 10 feet deep, which is very shallow for a 300-foot tree. So, my question to you all is, how do they remain upright through centuries of storms and earthquakes? Well, I'll tell you. The secret is that their roots extend outward and intertwine with the roots of other redwoods. Essentially, the trees hold each other up. They literally stand strong together. Additionally, they have created their own supportive ecosystem by releasing water vapor that turns into fog. They ensure the whole community of trees stay moist and healthy. This is a very powerful analogy for our organizations. If we want our companies to weather turbulent markets and big challenges, we need the same type of support, mutual support structure. No team can thrive in isolation. Just as each redwood depends on the forest, each department or squad in your company should be connected to others, sharing information, lending support, and working towards a common goal. The culture should encourage people to reach out, reinforce one another. When one team hits a problem, another comes to help. That interdependence creates an organization that can stand very, very tall and for the long run. So when we talk about collaboration and breaking silos, we're really talking about building your forest, the underlying network and relationships and processes that makes your whole organization strong and adaptable. So now we're going to talk about the importance of talent philosophy and long-term org design. Now, when we talk about talent philosophy, this is all things talent. Why is this important in a conversation about org design? Because an organization is ultimately made up of people, and how you manage those people will determine if your structure really works in practice. Think of a talent philosophy as the DNA or operating model for people decision. It will basically answer questions like, do we mostly hire senior experts from outside? Or do we grow juniors into seniors? How do we view performance? Do we reward individual rock stars or emphasize team achievements? What do we do with underperformers? Coach them or move them out quickly? How do we keep our best people? Clear career paths, stock options, constant learning opportunities? All of these reflect our philosophy. Now, why does this tie into culture? Because if there's a mismatch, say you stated culture, your culture is people first, but your talent practices treat people as they're easily replaceable, your structure and strategy will suffer from disengaged employees. On the flip side, if you on the flip side, a strong talent philosophy aligned with culture can be a huge strategic enabler. Let me give you a quick example. Let's take Netflix. Netflix is known for a talent philosophy of treating employees like a pro sports team, not a family. They value top performers, pay top of market, and aren't afraid to part ways if someone isn't an A player. That philosophy influences their org, They have a relatively flat hierarchy, lots of freedom with responsibility, and they expect people to exercise good judgment rather than being rule bounded. Now, with contrast, a company like Salesforce that emphasizes Ohana, which is Hawaiian for family, as a core value, their talent philosophy leans more towards inclusion, long term development, and internal mobility. Both approaches work, but they must align with the company's identity and goal. As HR leaders, one of our roles is to define and clarify the talent philosophy in partnership with the CEO and the executives, and then ensure the organizational design supports and enables it. So, in summary, know what your approach to talent is, make sure it's intentional, and design your organization and culture to reinforce that approach. Additionally, I will briefly touch on where companies often get this wrong, and it's critical to keep top of mind. You are going to be a reminder, you are designing for business success, not people. Oftentimes, we make decisions based upon a person or people's growth expectations or preferences to try and retain them. This is never what's best for the business, and you must always keep this top of mind. Best practice when developing an organizational design, never do it with names in boxes. Keep it abstract, no names, and focus on what the business needs. Again, do not let individuals derail what's important for the business to be successful. Now we're going to move on and talk about culture and leadership styles that impact and their impact on structure. These are what sometimes we call soft elements. They have very hard consequences for your organization's success. Culture is how we do things around here. For example, it influences whether people prefer clear instruction versus independent decision making. For example, if you have a very entrepreneurial environment, fast paced, moving culture, implementing a rigid multi layer bureaucracy will likely fail. People will go against it, as you know and can expect. They'll ignore it, or honestly, they'll just up and leave. In contrast, a very conservative culture, imagine a company in a heavily regulated industry, might struggle if suddenly you adopt a free form, no titles, no rule structure. Academic research and practical experience both show that culture and structure need to be in harmony. One influences another in a continuous loop. Now, leadership style, particularly of the founder or CEO, is a practical reality that we must account for. Some CEOs are visionaries, but not detail oriented. Others are micromanagers. Others are coaches and mentors. These styles will naturally bend the structure around them to fit. If you have a CEO who wants to be involved in everything, they may insist on many direct reports or being in every meeting, all of which can become a bottleneck, and all of which I'm sure everyone on this call has experienced at one time or another. Part of our job in HR is to advise and gently guide leaders to a structure that works for the business, sometimes despite their own personal style, while also leveraging their strengths. So this can be quite complex, but we're going to continue speaking about it on the next slide.
I'm seeing a lot of commentary. I think you really hit a hot spot on this one, Christina. And I've heard it a lot as to how much do we design and flex the organization to the leader, whether it be the CEO, the owner, the board, versus how much we try and buffer that and create an organization that aligns with the business mission and strategy, not necessarily the leadership style of the CEO. What have you seen in your experience?
Absolutely. I'll be honest with you. I've made the pitfall, and you have somebody really amazing at that seat, and you really try to work around them so that this way they can be the most successful. That was the thinking. The truth of the matter is, we always have to go back to the business. What are we trying to achieve here? And will this be impactful? And it's a really hard shift. And I'll be honest, even when you make the shift, it's really easy to get caught up in it and shift back. But this becomes really critical. And if you're able to establish the trust by following these steps, it'll also make it a lot easier for you as the partner to really influence here and help guide them because they understand through all these steps. Oh, wait, we're doing this because we want to be successful and you want to make me successful by following this, if that makes any type of sense.
Thank you. It's good principles to guide us.
Thank you. So, continuing the conversation, it's also worth noting that culture, I'm sure as you all know, is not static. If you're scaling up, your culture will need to evolve. And sometimes the structure needs to adapt accordingly, or vice versa. For example, if you're early on, everyone is talking to everyone and everyone's part of the decision making, and it's a very open culture, I can pretty much assure you by the time you get to 100, 200 employees and you're global, you may and you should, I wouldn't even say you may, you should develop the need for formalized communication channels simply because it becomes so overly complex and you will get in your own way. But what you need to try to do in order to maintain openness is really understand what type of tools does your organization need? Will Slack help you mimic the old days? What it's all individualized and customized, but you have to think about how we communicate and how can we communicate most effectively as you grow. And lastly, I want to emphasize the point on executives believing in cultural impact. Over 90% of executives believe that a healthy, aligned culture adds value to the firm. Culture is not a fluffy concept. It truly can enable or derail your strategy. When designing the org, it's wise to ask, does the org structure reinforce the culture we want? And does it accommodate the realities of our leadership style and capabilities? If not, either the design will not stick or it will force a culture clash, neither of which you want. So now we get to the practicality of how do you do this? How do you design around a visionary CEO? Many of us have worked with or for a visionary founder or CEO. This kind of leader leads with big, bold ideas, a charismatic style, and all consuming passion for the product or the mission. These leaders are a huge asset to our organization. They often are the competitive advantage of a young company, but their very strength could strain an organization. Some of the common issues, and again, I'm sure many of you have worked with visionary leaders, and you know these common issues are founders wanting to make every decision, having far more direct reports than they realistically can manage, or changing priorities on a whim because they had a new idea over the weekend. So, how do you structure around such a person for success? One key answer is for a visionary, ensure you have an integrator. So, have a visionary and integrator duo. This comes from the entrepreneurial operating system EOS. The visionary is the idea machine. The integrator is the execution part of the machine. Think of Steve Jobs, visionary, and Tom Cook, integrator, sorry, at Apple. And then for Walt Disney, think of Walt Disney as the visionary and his brother Roy Disney, who handled all finance and operations. The integrator keeps the train running and translate the vision into action. As one expert put it, the integrator can take the vision out of your head and build the structure to bring it to life, aligning the team, driving accountability, and protecting your energy as a founder. If you notice a founder is getting stretched thin or a company's growth is stalling because the founder is in the weeds, that's a signal to add an integrator or I guess the more practical call out for this is the chief operating officer. The goal here is to keep the visionary in their genius mode, strategy, vision, key relationships, inspiring the teams, and offload the rest to a capable structure. This can often rejuvenate the founder too. Instead of being exhausted by the tactical, they can focus on what they can do. It's a win win. The company scales more smoothly and keeping the founder's vision and creativity alive in a very healthy way. As a next thing that we want to talk about practically is structuring cross functional teams. And we're going to speak specifically in regards to product teams. One of the most effective organizational moves for a company that builds products, we're talking about tech software, hardware, even services, has been shifting to cross functional product teams. An old model like an assembly line. Product comes up with requirements, tosses it over to engineering to build, and then marketing promotes it, etc. That often leads to misalignment, friction, and slow cycle times. The new model, pioneered by companies like Spotify, Amazon, Google, is to create a small, autonomous teams focused on specific products or features containing a mix of roles. So, for example, imagine you run a mobile app company with three main features in your app. Instead of a big engineering department and a separate design team, you form three squads. Each squad has 4 to 5 engineers, one product manager, one designer, maybe a data analyst or marketing liaison if needed. Each squad is responsible for one feature end to end design, build, test, and iterate. This is the idea of mini startups within your organization. Amazon calls them two pizza teams. And indeed, they keep the team small intentionally. Why small? Because small teams can act quickly and feel more accountable. Jeff Bezos wanted each team to feel independent enough to rapidly innovate, staying close to the customer and not getting bogged down by large group politics bureaucracy. Cross functional teams also directly combat silo mentality. When a developer, a designer, and a QA sit together daily, they gain mutual understanding and solve problems together rather than blaming one another, each other's departments. Instead, they come together to work as one. It's important, though, that each team has a clear owner, usually a product manager who has both the responsibility and authority to drive the team's agenda and avoid backlog. This product owner communicates what the squad needs to accomplish in terms of business terms, prioritized tasks, and clear objectives. Now, when you have multiple such teams, you need some alignment mechanisms. Companies use different tactics. So, for example, at Spotify, they have the concept of chapters and guilds where people in the same function across squads meet to share best practices. So, all designers still collaborate on a coherent design language for, as an example. In this model, you still need overall product strategy that ties their work together. For HR and leaders, supporting cross-functional teams means maybe changing hiring and evaluations. This way, you ensure that the people that you are hiring are T-shaped, in-depth in one skill, but has breadth across multiple disciplines. Performance reviews might become more team-oriented and practical in meaning you dissolving some traditional department lines. You might still have a head of engineering, for example, ensuring technical excellence across teams, but day to day, engineers take their direction from product team and PM rather than a distant functional manager. It's a different way of organizing, but companies like Amazon swear by it. For you, the takeaway is if speed and product innovation are vital, we strongly consider structuring into cross functional teams. It can do wonders for breaking silos and keeping everyone focused on delivering value to the customer and fast.
I love it. And I'm seeing a number of commentary here of individuals who have been implementing that and working with that. And they're saying that you're right, the leader, the manager, the functional is responsible for the skills and developing those skills and so that they can be effective in the cross-functional. And the lead in the cross-functional team is responsible for the product or the outcome, not the people. The team itself is managing the people. And I'm seeing some commentary on the self-managed teams, and we're seeing more and more from the McKinsey information that's come out on that. this was a great framework to go through. Thank you.
Thank you. So now if we start looking at organizing for customer obsession, we'll take Jeff Bezos as example. He famously said, obsess over customers, not competitors. Organizing around customer obsession means we design everything from our team structure to our process with the customer's experience in mind. A common barrier to this is traditional functional org charts. Each department cares about its own piece, and then unfortunately, the customer can and often will fall between the cracks. For example, if you think of a time you had a customer and had to deal with the company's silo, like being bounced from, having a customer and trying to resolve their issue, and you're being bounced from sales department to customer support, and each one handing it off to the others, just basically creating complete frustration and confusion for yourself, and unfortunately impacting the customer. So, how can we address this through org design? One approach is journey focused teams. Map out the key phases of your customer's life cycle and consider assigning cross functional teams to own each phase. So, for example, some SaaS companies, for instance, have a dedicated customer onboarding division that spans across sales, engineering, implementation specialists, and sometimes including support staff who specifically focus on making a new customer successful in the first 90 days. They report to one executive and have metrics like time to first value, and onboarding satisfaction. This way, from the moment a contract is signed to the moment the customer is up and running, one accountable group sees it through. For example, one of the examples we can give in the real world is if we take healthcare, for example, healthcare traditionally had siloed entities, hospitals, then you had insurance companies, physicians, and so forth. Kaiser integrated all of it, taking doctors, hospitals, insurance, and putting it all under one roof. And anybody who lives in California knows they will advocate for Kaiser for this because the structural decision was driven by a customer centric philosophy. Patients shouldn't have to navigate complexity to get care. In your industry, think what are the equivalent silos that a customer has to navigate, and how can we bring them together? In the end, we should all talk about customer feedback. A customer obsessed org constantly listens to their customer and feeds that information back into improvements. Structurally, you might institutionalize this, say, for example, through a chief customer officer, customer success officer, they can go by different names, who sits at the leadership table and represents or sets up a customer advisory board that interacts with your teams. So either way, you want to make sure that the customer voice is present and at your leadership table. And equally important, give your frontline employees enough autonomy to solve customer issues. If an angry client calls, your support rep should feel empowered with guidelines to make it right and empowered to solve for the issue. That empowerment often requires a cultural shift and sometimes structural shift as well. A customer centric org makes sure that the org isn't fragmented by incompetent systems. Marketing, sales, and support should ideally share the same view of the customer history. This might mean aligning under one executive or at least foregoing strong collaboration agreements between those functions. And so basically, to sum up this slide, being customer obsessed in org design is about structural unity and focusing on the customer's perspective. Tear down the walls that make customer deals with your internal staff complex. Instead, absorb the complexity internally and present a simple response interface to the customer. The easier you make it for your customers to deal with you, the more they will reward you with loyalty. Now, the next two slides I'm going to go over briefly, but this is here really as a resource for you. So when you start to sit down, you start to think of your organization, unleashing your strategy, these are questions you should be asking yourself, your organization. So again, this is here as a reference. And then also to go over throughout this presentation, what I did was I reflected best practices and frameworks. And here I created a slide for you to leverage them. I talked through them in different ways, but here you can go deeper and you can use this slide as a resource. And in conclusion, I want to emphasize the overarching theme: intentional design. Great companies don't succeed by accident, they build themselves for success. Today, we talked about how to do that in terms of org structure and operations. If you remember nothing else, please remember that alignment between strategy, structure, culture, and talent is paramount to your success. And that agility, the ability to adapt and collaborate fluidly, is a huge competitive advantage in a fast changing world. I encourage you all, as HR and business leaders, to be the champions of these ideas within your organization. Often, HR has a unique cross functional perspective to see silos and misalignments that others might not notice. Use that as an advantage point. Ask the tough questions, bring data and best practices from outside, and partner with your CEO and department heads to tune your organization for success. Learning and adapting never stops, and keep listening to your teams. They'll often signal when the structure is not working for them. Thank you all for your time and engagement. I hope this session has sparked some ideas and given you some tools to drive positive change within your organization. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. It really encouraged, and thank you, Christina, for adding some of the resources at the end, 'cause then we can research even further. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Christina. Her LinkedIn contact information is in the chat, it'll be in the notes. And thank you for joining us. I cannot emphasize enough, if today sparked a new idea or it gave you even just one thing to take action on, don't let it sit. All those notes you took, those little ideas that sparked in your head, share them, use them, and keep growing. Until next time, keep leading with confidence and clarity.
Thank you.